guys. So today's episode is Black is Love. And we're doing it with my husband. Every episode in the past we have tried to do with him, it just doesn't go right. So we're just gonna jump into this topic. So for us, my husband is white and Filipino, and then I'm chocolate. So we have a triracial child. So a lot of the topics we're going to discuss today are going to be based on raising our son, the challenges that we have faced within our own relationship, the mixing of cultures, just all the things, and then as it relates to our beliefs and how we kind of function as a family. So my first question for you, Bubba, is going to be, what do you think it looks like for our mixing of cultures, like having our different beliefs, but also finding that balance when it comes to like merging them with our son?
In terms of process or what we want as a whole?
Start with process and then we'll go into a whole.
So I think the process is a lot more, at least in today's days, can be a lot more difficult than it should be. Mm-hmm. I think you and I, early in our relationship, before we were married and had our own difficulties with understanding that though we come from different cultures, we're really more or less the same. And I think a wide perception is if you come from a different background, you're the complete opposite or have nothing in common. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, like even like me being mixed, half white and half Filipino, it is different because one side is like culturally different than the other, but it's a lot of the same cultural beliefs and same building blocks that cultures have.
Give me an example for the sake of conversation.
Like within my own experience?
Yeah.
So, like, Filipinos are definitely very big on education, mm-hmm. Very big on the family name, very big on establishing one's own self as a respect to the family. And I think a lot of, white Americans are the same way. That's what I have, because my dad being white American is what I have to go off of.
Yeah.
It's the same exact thing, only without based in more of American culture rather than thousands of years within a different type of culture. So it's, my dad, very hardworking. My grandfather is very hardworking. My great grandmother was. And it just kind of trickled downhill. And it's the same thing within my mom's side of the family. I feel both sides of my family are where my work ethic came from. Because my mom is just as hardworking as my dad.
Yeah. So with Black relationships or Black families, because that's the sense of the topic we're going on, is for Black History Month. But we know that the Black family has changed so much over years, just from separation with the prison system or just lack of foundation.
Welfare system.
Yeah, welfare system, like all these things have changed it. But I would say for mine, my parents divorced before I even knew what that was. And I'm not sure if I would say that like a nuclear family would have benefited me in any way, because I still feel like I got both halves. But just before we jump into like the merging of cultures, your parents were also divorced, but do you think like that would have made a difference for you?
I definitely think it could have if I had both parents in my household, because I, like a lot of people who grew up with step parents, was very angry all the time. Me primarily living with my mom until I was about 14. I hated having a new stepdad. I hated having new boyfriends in my mom's life. I moved quite a bit. I remember going to about 9 different elementary schools, and a lot of that was due to my mom either dating somebody or being married pretty often. So I was always having to move and adjust to new environments. And my mom, although being Filipino, she was raised American, being from here. So me being second generation American, I experienced more of a Filipino American upbringing rather than traditional Filipino. Because my grandmother and my grandfather, while their marriage wasn't the easiest, they did not believe in divorce.
Right.
And my mom definitely doesn't now, but of course, her being pretty young when she had me, and my dad, them just not working out, kind of different paths ensued from that. So, what was the question?
Do you think that having the nuclear family is important, or like it made a difference in your upbringing?
Yeah, I definitely think it would have. But I also think there can be outliers because statistically speaking, and just from what I witnessed and experienced myself, you are at risk of worse things happening. You know, being in jail, not finishing high school. If you come from a divorced household. So I definitely think it maybe could have done that, but also you have to look at who your parents are. I don't think my parents were the type to be able to come together and still be a healthy example of marriage. So I do think it kind of turned out for the best that they weren't together.
Yeah.
So it's really just a matter of what if at that point.
Yeah. And that's like the same thing that me and you have always talked about, that like everything you said with your family, which I think is super important to highlight, that we try to separate and say like, oh, this is the Black experience, this is the white experience, but everything you mentioned, I went through the same. Like my dad, I had a different stepmom a lot. My mom, same thing. We moved all the time. Like I think my first time going from one school to the next was high school. So I was constantly moving for my mom was more opportunity based. And then it led into relationship based, but a lot of it is the same. Like that was something that definitely attracted me to you, was that we had the same understanding. Like we had the same background. We could understand how to navigate our challenges that would have come up, because you can't build a life with someone that has completely different values or experiences you. It's just kind of difficult. So that was definitely interesting for me when it came down to merging cultures, especially this being my first interracial relationship. It was challenging to address the fact that there may be differences.
Yeah.
But
and me coming from an interracial household, as well as, you know, me growing up, I was in predominantly Black schools my whole life, so it wasn't my first interracial relationship.
Yeah.
So it was sort of a process, I guess, not that I hope it doesn't make me sound better, but I guess to get you on the same wavelength that I was used to.
Yeah, and I think that's important too, because people hear that and take it wrong, when in reality, until you put yourself in a different environment or have different conversations with people, you don't realize what you were doing too much of or what you don't know. Yeah. So like for me, I went to predominantly white schools when I lived in California. Then I came to Georgia and had a completely different experience. I didn't know how Black I was. Like I really didn't. And then I went to Savannah State of all schools and came home. It was like completely everything Black, which isn't necessarily bad, but it is when you're ignorant. And then meeting my husband, I'm like, oh my gosh, all these conversations that I only had like surface level of, like I didn't fully understand what I was saying or what I was thinking. And that's like super important now when we're planning for our kid and just like what we want that to look like.
And I think it's good to piggyback off of that in terms of what culture means, because even when we first started dating, I think you were surprised a lot by the types of music I had grown up listening to, or things that I was interested in that you would or anybody else would perceive as predominantly Black culture. But me being down here, again, primarily my friends being Black and Hispanic and going to Black and Hispanic schools, I was hip on a lot of things that the average person wouldn't perceive a white person to be.
More so because it's like with that video we saw with the lady talking about Southern. It's not Black culture, it's urban. It could be ethnic. It could be anything but specifying it to one demographic, when in reality it's where you live. And a lot of the times we miss that we take it as appropriation, when if it's played on the radio, it's full access. Anyone can listen to it.
I definitely think it teeters that sometimes. Not
what appropriation?
It can, because you have those examples of, and I kind of was in high school and in middle school, the white kid trying to be Black. So definitely it can cross over to appropriation, but there's also a difference of, if you've grown up around that constantly, of course you're going to mimic what's in your surroundings.
And that's where I think there's a line, because it can't be appropriation if you are around it all of the time.
Yeah.
If that is your environment, that is, at that point, that would be your culture. You can't say it's appropriation. Appropriation is you live in Beverly Hills and you're
trying to be a thug.
Yeah, like that's not the same. That damn movie, I can't think of the name to save my life. But
Malibu's Most
that
Wanted.
one, that's appropriation. That's appropriation. However,
That's what they called me in middle school.
That's unfortunate. But like by the end of the movie, obviously they understood that he genuinely loved the culture. If people haven't seen it, you should go watch it because it's actually quite funny. But what is like the same thing? We do all this work to be so against people actually wanting to be a part of the culture, then complain about people don't understand the culture or don't. Yeah, and it's just like, well, damn, where's the middle ground?
Also, it's at least from what I've seen within the black community too. And to preface this, it can be annoying that me, somebody who's considered an outsider, doesn't have a right to an opinion on an opposite culture, which is kind of something we dealt with early in our relationship.
Yeah.
But it also is like always been my mindset in my adult life where if it's around me, of course I have a right to an opinion on it. Especially when having black friends and now being having a biracial son who is going to be seen as black a lot of his life.
Yeah.
I do have an opinion on what sort of environment my son is going to be around. So to kind of go into what I was going to say, it's... Damn, I forgot what I was going to say. Damn. What were we talking about?
Fuck.
My bad, guys.
I don't remember now. Having an opinion. People
about black culture. It's black people can be very gatekeeper mentalities, and I understand because Asians are the same exact way. Yeah. Asians don't like outsiders. If you go to Asia, whether it's China, Japan, and even a big part of the Philippines, you probably won't see a lot, if any, white people, black people, or Hispanic people, because Asia is very homogenous. It is pure blood in that sense. But also here in America, it's
like a hierarchy.
But also since America was built, it's been a melting pot of cultures.
Yeah.
So to get upset that other people like your culture, but then to get upset that they like your culture too much, you have to realize what that is. Because as long as you're eating a hamburger, I mean, black people, technically, if you want to get technical about it, you're also cultural appropriating.
Or I think that's the same.
It is. Hamburgers from Germany.
That's the same. No,
I'm saying there's little minute examples of it because hamburger is not technically black or white or even American culture because of where it originated. Yeah. And it's semantics at that point, but it's just interesting to see the little examples of gatekeeping and what we don't realize is other cultures just forming into one.
And I would say, too, just to piggyback off of that, is that, and I say this a lot, we have a hard time stepping into the present. So having that mentality, at least the one that I talk about more often than not, is hair. A lot of us this ain't my hair. It's not. So when we talk about that,
it's my hair.
I bought this one.
Asian.
No, I think this is Indian.
Asian.
I don't think they didn't. You know what?
Indians are Asian.
But so we say all that to say, we think about hair when it comes down to locks. The history of it is that the white Americans thought it was dreadful. That's where dreadlocks come from. Yep. It's dreadful. However, we are in a period where we have worked very hard to get out of that image, that mindset. And it's very frustrating when we have conversations like this about appropriation and we can't identify the line of someone actually appreciates this contribution to culture, to trends, instead of, their ancestors or, the culture of America was just divisive. It was hate. It was to bring down different cultures. And in reality, at one point it was. Yeah. But we're also at a point where... We're not at that point anymore. Exactly. People love different people's culture. I love Hispanic culture. I love their colors. I love how bold and unapologetic they are. I love it. Does that make me an appropriator if I decide... Is that a word?
Appropriator?
Did I make that up?
Possibly,
it felt so wrong coming.
You might have, but if
it works anyway. But am I wrong if I want to buy a certain dress that is based in Hispanic culture? I'm not saying I'm Hispanic. I'm showing that type of respect, and I think that it's unfortunate that we can't get past that. So,
Yeah. And again, that goes back to what I was saying. This is going to be kind of a bit of a tangent, but it ties into what you're saying. I grew up a big fan of comic books.
Mm-hmm.
So around the time Black Panther came out, you had all these people, and I think I showed you a video about it, about this particular black woman saying, no white people are allowed to come see the movie because it's for us, and y'all need to block the door so black people can go see it. With due respect, that's not necessarily black culture because, for one, it's a comic book. Two, the person who created it was a white person. And yes, it definitely was a cultural significance for black people not having, if any at that time, if I can remember, representations in comic books of black people. It also transcended just black people because there was just as many white people reading that comic book. And just as many white, Hispanic, or black kids that were mutual fans of that character. So to kind of tie into what you were saying, there's a difference between something being for a certain demographic and about a certain demographic that transcends that, which is the goal of things like that, whether it's movies or comic books or video games. You can have, let's say you have a certain Asian character within a video game, and me being Asian, I can't get mad if that Asian character touches the hearts of black kids or Hispanic kids or white kids, because it's not just about what that character is, but what that character can represent that can spark a fire within other demographics.
Yeah. And I like that. That's a good way to tie that one to our next topic. Navigating the interracial experiences that we have. So when we got together, we didn't have any real major issues. Like, my dad is married to an amazing woman that is white. She's a white woman. But it's always been prevalent in my dad's side. Like, my dad's side, they're all married to someone of the opposite demographic. That's the wrong word. Ethnicity. That's the right word.
Both in the bottom.
Yeah, can they? Because I feel like demographic is more.
Demographic.
Yeah, but is it the word that is used when you're talking about it? I feel like it's more ethnicity than
demographic is like a group of.
Because I hate race. Yeah. That's not. We're human.
Ethnicity,
race.
nationality.
Anyway, nationality. That's probably better. Anyway, so but they're all married to someone of a different nationality, and
Except for your mom's side.
Right, my mom's side isn't. They're really big on us and being with us. So meeting my husband has been really different because I was never in that mindset. It wasn't like I was opposed to it openly. And I think going through different things that we were going through and learning just how to navigate one another, it was interesting to realize how more of my subconscious actions were against it more than what I actually did. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I definitely, just thinking back to certain examples, I could tell that you were uncomfortable. I wouldn't say against it, but definitely that it was something very new for you, which is, natural. But I think where some of the frustration was, a lot of times within relationships, we want our significant other to emote the same way we are, so we feel echoed and secured. And because it wasn't my first rodeo, so to speak, I think there were times that you were wondering, why is he not experiencing this, or why is he not having these same thoughts? And it's because I've been here before.
And I think for me, because I block all that out, it didn't happen. So it definitely didn't help the process. I could definitely know that that's something we talk about a lot too. Just the resistance that came with adapting to our changes, and our relationship moved much quicker than normal people. So we had to adapt very fast to just our differences. And I think the biggest thing that we had to overcome in the beginning was more so just my mentality of my culture as opposed to just more the reality. And I think that's saying it lightly. There are things that we all believe about our culture. There are certain things that Asian culture believes is wholeheartedly something that should not be changed, such as divorce.
And things that sorry, not to cut you off, but even in understanding that just because it's part of your culture doesn't mean you have to agree to it. There's a lot of things within Asian culture I just find asinine. Yeah. Or that I just think are just not, we're fitting for a certain period of time. But as we had a conversation earlier, times evolve and adapt, and you have to be able to take in what is needed and what is useful for you and throw out what it can be a hindrance. And for me, the only Asian culture has to be this way. It's just not useful because while I love and cherish my Filipino culture, whether it's the food or the music, um, and certain traditions that we have that I want to instill in the rest of our children's lives, there's also some stuff that I'm just not history that does not need to be, beat into their heads because similar to America, we were also colonized.
Yeah.
But I'm not going. That's not what Marvelous and the rest of our children are going to hear on a daily basis. That don't like Spanish people because they oppressed us. I love Spanish and Hispanic culture. Mm-hmm. Most of my friend group is Hispanic. Them and a few of them are happy to be Spanish, but that doesn't mean I'm going to put a target on their back.
Yeah.
Just because of what someone down in their bloodline did to someone in mine.
Yeah. And I think that's super important too. Like, again, what I bring up a lot and I talked about in my Black is Diverse episode with Sabrina is I think there's a fine line in what, like, same thing you just said, that what needs to be taught. And in the beginning of it, I was kind of harsh, but I don't think that we need to dwell on the negative history. I still stand on that because there's so many things that, like Sabrina had ended up mentioning, our kids don't know the positive. And I feel like that's more important to let them know, like, hey, don't allow the negative to repeat, but also make sure that you're instilling more of the positive things that we're capable of doing. Like, he needs to know that we are, he's okay, sit down, take a walk. He's good. That we're capable, sorry guys, Marvelous is sleeping. That we're capable of creating and inventing and just being able to bring people together and do all these things. But in reality, every Black History Month, every Juneteenth, every opportunity, we are reminding people of our division. Yeah, of our past, of the things that's happened. Yeah, and it gets very old. And unfortunately for me and people that are set in my algorithm, they're also tired. We have so many other things that we can be talking about right now. We don't like to talk about how many friends of different nationalities that we have when it benefits it. Yeah, like, let's talk about how many white friends we have. And those same people that have the voices and that are always in a crowd, they excuse those white people like, oh yeah, I believe this, but you know what? You're cool. I give you the pass. We can't do that because at the end of the day, and something that's big right now, and I'm probably going to lose some people with this, we like to talk about being black and white. It's always a separation. We have been here way too long, and we have contributed to the building of this nation to not consider ourselves Americans. Yep. That's just a reality.
Martin Luther King Jr. was an American through and through. And
he claimed that the entire time.
Like MLK Day being just last week, I think it's important to kind of harp on that for a second. It's, again, him being so American is where he was able to get to where he got to before his death. Yeah. The reasons he believed in what he was. He didn't say, let's pack up and move so we can have our own. He said, let's integrate. Let's be a part of this society. Let's be a part of this culture. I want it to be better for my children and my children's children, was in his speech. Yeah. And it's important to note, to acknowledge that and to carry that going forward, because you have a lot of people who, similar to what you were saying, like, they refuse to acknowledge that, yes, while it was just not too long ago that Black people was going through what they were going through, also Black people still wanted to help this country after that and still wanted to be a part of it. And you have Black Americans who nowadays, if they share an opinion that isn't quote unquote Black, they get outcast. Like Ben Carson, one of the...
Yeah, people really didn't like him.
But for the longest time, he was the poster boy. He was the like today's version of MLK, one of the most brilliant men to ever live. And the minute he endorsed Donald Trump, he got outcast. Larry Elder, another very famous politician, very intelligent person, same thing. And I'm not saying that you have to agree with everything somebody says because of they are a certain demographic, but at least for me, and I'm realizing not a lot of people are like this, if I see someone who I admire that has a different opinion of me, I need to be, wait, maybe they're seeing something I am not seeing. Maybe if this person is so as intelligent as I think they are, there might be some truth and validity in what they're saying. So rather research it rather than cast them out as soon as they disagree with me.
Yeah, I agree. And that definitely comes with our current climate, with cancel culture, with Black everything, and the current presidency administration, there is a lot of that, and I think something that drew me to it more would have been this past election because of my current stance on just opinions in general. Like I say, every time I make a post that is controversial, I do not share my political views. I will still not share them. But one thing that really bugs me and that will get me to unfollow someone faster is us basing our level of friendship or agreement on political opinions or something that is consistently changing. Politicians change every 2 minutes. Every time there's an election, they are changing. And I understand values. Like if they are real strict values and that really affects your life, but me having a personal opinion about something that affects my household has nothing to do with you. And I think when it comes down to even relationships, loop that back around, we have a lot of cultural differences. And I think even when it comes to the interracial side of it, people have a lot of opinions that you are just further diluting your line. You're allowing people to influence you and change your mind. And
not just within Black culture either, like I said.
It's in all cultures. And it's a big problem because at the end of the day, just because I chose to be with someone that does not look like me does not mean the values are not the same, does not mean that we didn't make sure that we still aligned in some way, because this relationship would affect our household. But me and my friend Jennifer, her liking blue and me liking red does not affect the fact that we became friends because we both love to go, I don't know, flower picking. That has nothing to do with it. At the end of the day, my opinion does not inflict change in her household, and her opinion doesn't inflict change in mine. And I think when it comes down to it, it all relates. And a big part of this topic and why I chose to do it this way and to talk about the interracial side is because a lot of the times we take this opportunity to talk so much about black. Amazing. We love it. We should be doing it all the time. We shouldn't take just 1 month to highlight it and make it such a big thing, because I do think at some point we need to talk about us just individually. Like, hey, what are you doing? What makes you feel good? Not trying to, again, separate us. Do I think that we need time such as Juneteenth to make our day? Yes, of course. But at what point, again, are we going to integrate and make it American?
And understand that, yes, while July 4th has a certain significance and was not the best time for the people, Black people within that time period, it's, 200 years ago now?
It's still not that long ago. When you think not about it. Long.
Well, in the sense of what I mean is, people who are celebrating July 4th now aren't thinking about that. They're not. They're just saying today is Independence Day. Let's just have fun. It's
for their nation as an American.
As an American, it's an excuse to throw hot dogs or hamburgers on the grill. It's an excuse to have friends over and drink beer and have music, and just have fun. And I'm not saying that detail isn't of importance, but don't chastise or crucify somebody because they're celebrating that holiday. It's that had nothing to do with them.
And I think too, when we think about like military people, a lot of the times after they're done with their contracts, they tend to be more on the American side, not necessarily, I'm Black. They're patriotic.
You can't be more patriotic than somebody who served in the military.
Exactly. So when we come down to it, are we casting them out because they now choose to celebrate July 4th? Is that something that we are trying to do? Do they get a pass? Are we limiting? Like, what does that look like? And I think when it comes to conversations like this, it's important, because if it's just an everyday person that chooses, you know what, I'm going to celebrate both because
it's an excuse to have fun too.
But not even just that. I've been here 27 years. For me, I'm an American. Like, I am African American. I am just American at the end of the day. My color, and honestly, that I'm not Black, that this is Black. So it's like there's so many different things that we can go into, but we have such a hard time accepting change. And it's unfortunate. But
to kind of piggyback off what you just mentioned too, I think it's very important to acknowledge what Black and or white means. And even to kind of harp on the African American thing you just mentioned, if you talk to actual Africans, a lot of times they were like, you're not African, you're Black.
That too, we've seen
or
that.
If you call an African person Black, I've asked them, like, they'll get offended. Like, I know, because to be Black in order to be white means to not necessarily know where you originate, so you're going
Mm-hmm.
based off the color of your
Yeah.
skin. Spanish people were just as pale as me when they
Yeah.
were coming to other countries, or conquering the Philippines, or conquering Mexico, or conquering the Americas. So, but they're not white; they're Hispanic,
Yeah.
or Spanish rather. My bad,
Mhm. Yeah.
my bad. That's big. They're Spanish. Um, so Russian people, yeah, they're technically white because they look like me, but they're Russian.
Yeah.
They are European. Africans, they are black skinned, but if you call them black, they will get offended. Within the Philippines, there are indigenous tribes within the Philippines that are darker than my wife. You wouldn't call them black because they would be like, no, I'm Filipino, I'm
Yeah.
Pinoy. So just to kind of tie all that together, we can't just go based off of color, and we also have to realize that originated and became a social construction of colonization and of immigration and certain things that were building blocks of this in other countries,
Yeah. And I think there was a
Western
video.
society.
Yeah. There was this video I saw of a lady talking about that. She said she came to visit, or she was about to move to the Americas. I don't remember which one it was, but nevertheless, she said she had got into this conversation with someone that had called her a stereotype. She was a darker complexioned woman. I think she was from Nigeria. I think she was Nigerian. And she was saying how this guy was just calling her all kind of stereotypes and things, and by the end of it he was like calling her black, and she was like, out of all the things that he said, the only thing that really pissed her off was being called black. And it was so crazy because we don't talk about those things. Like, we take offense when someone says, oh, I don't want to be black, meaning people within the African descent. And it's just like, well, who would want to be? And I think it, again, is taken so
It's to say you
negatively.
don't know where you come from,
But it's
essentially.
when you don't even know that. Like, let's say that's not something that we knew. Why is there so much offense when you don't want to be associated with just being black? Black is literally an American term.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I
what
want
else?
to know where I'm from. I just found out I'm Cameroonian.
Yes.
So
She can't
that's
even
pretty.
remember.
No,
She can't even
no, I
remember.
couldn't. I wanted to make sure I pronounced it right. Anyway, but that's interesting to me, and I think what also bugs me is, when I was getting this information, I was like, it would be so cool to say I'm Irish. People get offended because it's like I'm saying, oh, I don't want to be
You
black.
want your blood
Do
to be
we
diluted.
realize that not only have we been colonized in so many different ways, shapes, or forms, at some point we probably all have a little bit of everything. But on the flip side of that, just because Irish is, and obviously there may not be black Irish people, I don't know, but just follow
Could
me.
be.
Yeah, follow me. I don't know. But just because it is predominantly represented by a person of pale skin, does not necessarily mean it is not a representation of someone of darker skin. Just because you want to have something different, right? To say, oh, that would be cool is not a bad thing. It is literally saying, I would love to be able to explore a different culture, a different heritage. Just all those things is so amazing, and being able to tie them in, it automatically is offensive.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not saying, again, I'm going in circles at this point, but it's not taking away from the beauty of being of African descent. But let's be real. We do these ancestries, and we try and find our roots, and we do all the research, but at what point do we feel weird about practicing it? Right? Again, I'm 27. I found out like a month ago that I have this background in this descent. I'm not going to start being Cameroonian. I'm not going to start picking
It'd
up
be
the traits.
disingenuous.
It is so wrong in so many ways, shapes, and form. But me wanting to look into it, okay, this is why most of my family line does this. This is why my color is this. There are so many things that you can
Cheekbones.
look at. Yeah, like those features are there, those characteristics, but that doesn't mean that, okay, I found out, so now I can say I'm Cameroonian.
It's
Not
like, yeah,
necessarily.
and that's funny because it's kind of, we're two sides of the same coin. Because I've had the exact opposite problem. I've had to try to prove myself that I'm Filipino,
Yeah.
and especially me being second generation American is even harder. If I were to go over to the Philippines, they wouldn't necessarily consider me Filipino because of me being American and not speaking the language fluently, or
Yeah.
going through certain things even though I am a part, that is my bloodline. I am Filipino, and even my mom being the same way, even looking it more so than me, and me not even resembling my mother that much, she would be considered an outsider as well because she was American. And she just broke a nail in case you didn't see that. Because she grew up American, and that's what my grandmother wanted because of the risk of prejudice and being outcasted. You know, not teaching my mom and my uncles the language, but we love the music and we love the food. So it's just that dichotomy of one side wanting to prove itself and the other side also wanting to learn what they are but not lose themselves within their lineage necessarily.
So like when we think about Marvelous, he's gonna have a very interesting life, especially and not just with us, like we've talked about before. His friend, like he's going to be surrounded by so many different cultures, and obviously we talked about it, but just for the sake of the content, how do you see us navigating that?
I think like the same thing I've told people I've had conversations with. I love my heritage and I want that to be a part of our lives and our children's lives, but I also want them to be them first. I you know, put a very big stock in my name. I am Thomas Anthony King II before I am white or Filipino. If I was Mexican or if I was Nigerian or just black, I'd be the same exact person I am now because my forefathers are the same exact person as me. She's been my dad and my granddad. And other than us looking different, we're the same person.
Looking different, y'all the same people.
That don't look alike.
Y'all look the same. He's just 20 years of advance.
Anyway,
30, 40? Is he that old?
My granddad's 71.
Oh shit, he's an actor.
Yeah. So I want him to be like, I am marvelous before I am black, before I am white, before I am Filipino. Yeah. That way, that can't be taken from him. Anybody can question, oh, you're too light to be black, or you don't look Asian enough to be Filipino, or you act this way, so you're not white. I'm marvelous. I like all of these things. I'm Thomas, you're Jasa. I want him to navigate his life as him. Not as his nationality or his race. I use race because that's what's used in today's age. Yeah. And I think we know a lot of people who think you have to navigate your life based off what the color of your skin is, and I think that's backwards. I think that creates a hindrance in what you're able to see or things you're able to experience, and it can just be very detrimental.
Yeah. And I agree. I think the biggest things that I've had to navigate when it came to planning to parent, more so is just as a mom, what obstacles is he going to face? And as always, the first one is going to be him being black. But I think as I've kind of understood more and more what you think and how you plan on doing it because you are his father. And I think that's something else that's really big in raising a son. I can make sure he has love and he's nurtured and he's understands compassion and empathy and all the things that come with the emotions. You are going to make sure he is ready to face the world. And that is where, as a woman of color that grew up with single moms around me everywhere, and that can be seen as a cultural trait, especially in the Americas, but it was really difficult for me to be able to step back. So I think understanding that he's going to have challenges as a mixed child,
as
a man, but that wasn't even something I worried about. And that's, I think, again, goes back to the culture. Him being a man was the last thing on my mind. It was more so just, you are mixed. And having a lot of mixed friends that were on the lighter side or on the darker side or on the confusing feature side, it was very interesting because I'm like, well, how am I going to let him know enough history or enough about his parts to make sure he also is able to build his identity? Taking away color, I was very insecure growing up. How do I instill security in him on top of the challenges he's going to face with the different nationalities that he may be friends with? Like he said, some of them was like, oh, you're going to be with your black friends. Some are going to be like, you with your white friends. He's going to be a nerd. I can feel it now.
Won't accept him.
Maybe, but we also don't know because I feel like as he gets older, he's already given some slang. I think he's gonna have the language down pat. He may be one of those just
They'll still
abstract
be,
kids.
yes, but in being of that demographic, Asians are very, very particular.
They may
The
be.
hardest to fit in with because they're just centuries of, and this is what people don't realize too. Talk about racism or prejudice. Asian people are just as bad, if not worse, than a lot of people, like white people calling black people outsiders, black people calling white people outsiders. I promise you, Asians are just as bad.
Well, we know that.
Yeah.
And I think that's something else that comes with it is kind of going back to our relationship. A lot of the things that we experienced since being together has been either like looks or comments or, just people not being for it. And flipping it back to parenting, how do you explain that? Without deterring him from entering the world confidently, how do you deter him from allowing it to set into him and make him feel less than? Because, yeah, he may not be accepted by his Asian side, but how do you teach that's okay?
I think, and for me, I think this goes more into the aspect of being a man. I think it's just simple. I think you tell them exactly that. I think if you tell them, look, people are going to look at you differently because of how you look. People are going to question you. Kids are going to make fun of you because of how your parents look and how you look, because it can be different. That's just going to happen, and you have to deal with it and move on. And I think a lot of times within this culture and within integrating culture, we make it a lot more difficult than what it actually is. And for men, I'm sure men, if any men are listening to this, they'll understand.
Probably not.
It's the simpler of an explanation, the more simple of an explanation you give, is it makes it easier to just, okay, people are just going to have their opinion. I can't do anything about that. The more you try to get someone to change it, the more you tie to their emotions or, oh, this is something that you need to fight to change. It's not, because as long as ignorance exists, you will have those kinds of examples. Whether it's racism or prejudice or just ignorance, none of that will ever stop. It's just a sad part of life. It's unfortunate, but all we can do, and me being his father, helping him navigate, and his little brothers, because we're probably going to have boys, navigate the world as men. They have to realize it's not going to be fun, but you make of it what you will. You decide where this goes. You decide whether it aggravates you, how to handle it, and whether you just brush it off and be like, yeah, it is what it is. I just can't control it.
Yeah. And I think this kind of brings me back to your lovely friend, Hal Kilmer. He always...
Shout out.
Shout out, Kilmer. But just what he said about, like, there's... what did he say? What was the word? There's like discrimination or segregation and stuff. There's everywhere. And that's a big point. Like, I can't teach him to be a man. So a lot of the times, a lot of our parenting styles are going to have to merge, or our goals for our son. But the one that we can say is consistent is no matter what, he's going to face some type of discrimination.
Yep. And I think one thing we've talked about before, this kind of ties in. When it comes to men and women, you being a woman, me being a man, one thing I do want to teach him and the rest of our boys, it's going to sound negative at first, but just let me trudge through it. Women are inherently born with value. They're born with something that boys and men will always yearn for, whether it's love or lust or beauty or just a partner. You're always going to be wanted in some way, shape, or form. Even the older you get and your beauty starts to fade, it'll become a homemaker or a wife or the pillar of a family. And something that I kind of pride myself on that I wasn't necessarily taught, but I feel like if I was taught younger, is that I'm not born with value. Off first hearing, it sounds negative. But I think for me, it's the sense of, okay, I have to go get what I want. I have to earn this. I have to build my own... I have to create my own building blocks, create my own thoughts, create my own sense of value, learn things, become useful, become vital in this, just in society. And something I want to teach him and the rest of our children is that while you might not be necessarily born with value, that doesn't make you invaluable. Yeah. That doesn't make you worthless. You have something to offer, but you also have to search for it. You have to learn. You have to be willing to learn. Easy to be taught. You have to be willing to go and get what you want, and if you're not qualified, become qualified.
Mm-hmm.
Become successful, take success, earn success, if that makes sense.
No, it does, and I think it's kind of crazy because, like, kind of going back to being raised around single mothers, Black mothers at that, it's there's like this really hard exterior on one side, but then on the other side, just making it a single mother thing, there's like this false sense of reality. And I think that's something I want to avoid with him is, like you're saying, there are certain things that you're just gonna have to work for.
Yep.
And I thank my dad for that because I vividly remember just one conversation we had when I was like in middle school about having to work twice as hard. And it wasn't just because I was a woman, it was because I'm Black. And that is a big thing. And I think reverting back to us as parents, I don't necessarily want to lead with because I'm Black. I want to lead with you just need to want to be better. And that will be
everybody.
yeah, and I was gonna say, like, not in necessarily a cocky way, but yeah, you should want to be better than everybody.
And that's one thing that, again, I was taught, but not in the sense of you have to.
Mm-hmm.
I was taught to be the hardest worker in the room.
Yeah.
And like something I feel it, goes into my work ethic, whether it's within sports, whether it's in my own professional career.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to be the best person in the room. I do
Yeah.
want to be the one where I might not get it on the first try, but I promise you I'm going to get it quicker than everybody else here.
Yeah.
I promise you again, I might not be the best, but eventually I will be able to outperform all of these people around me.
Mm-hmm.
Not because I want to be better than them, but because I want to be able to lead not only myself, but at the point where I am self-sufficient, I can help everyone else around me.
Yeah.
I can become a vital member of a team. And back to teaching that within Marvelous, and again, our other three boys, it's what I have noticed, especially within men, and it's something that irritates me very much. When you teach a man or a little boy that he is, you're too good for them,
Mm-hmm.
or you have this, you have that. I have noticed it creates a lot of very, very feminine men.
Yeah.
Where
it's in placing too much emotion.
Too much emotion, too much cockiness, creating them to be a diva. Like something, this might be a tangent. Hope if it offends anybody, I'm sorry. I personally find it very feminine for a man to think he's all that based on his looks. Mm-hmm. I find it very feminine for a man to, even if he is an attractive man, to express that. It's something I find to be a feminine quality because you shouldn't want a woman to want you based off of your looks.
At least for them to say that.
Yeah,
like it's different I know if we see it, but
right. I put time into my appearance. I am somebody who cares about what they look, but also if you're just judging me based off what I look like, what else do I have to offer? Yeah. So he's a very attractive boy, our son, but I also want him to know you can and will be the hardest worker, not because I'm demanding it of you, because you're less than if you're not. But that is what a man is supposed to be.
But also being capable. I think that's something else that we have gotten rid of in it, just across the board. We do not instill the skills, the foundation to make sure our kids know you are capable of a lot. Mm-hmm. You're capable, really, they always said, you're capable of anything you put your mind to. Yes and no. Because if my kid wants to be an architect, but he can't draw or identify a square, he's not going to be no architect.
But also, if you teach him, you love to, you are inherently valuable. Yeah. On top of what you just said, he's gonna grow up thinking he deserves an opportunity to be an architect,
because
even if he doesn't know what he's doing.
Yeah, and I think that entitlement.
That reminded me of what I was gonna say when it comes to men. Mm-hmm. I've noticed that if you say, you are a perfect little boy, you're gonna grow up to be a perfect man without instilling values or skills or abilities or work ethic. They grow up thinking, why don't I have these opportunities? Yeah. I deserve this. And
someone told me
as a man, and I'm sure other men who are watching this agree, you don't deserve anything. Nobody owes you anything. And I'm not saying it's because you're worthless, but you need to go out there and earn it. You need to say, look, give me an opportunity. I promise you will not be disappointed. I will prove to you that I am worthy of this. There's nothing wrong with saying, please give me an opportunity. I want to prove my worth. I want to prove to you that I'm just as good as everyone, not because I had to, because I'm of a certain race. Not because I worked harder because I thought if I didn't, I'd be worthless, but because I was taught by my mom and my dad, I need to work hard, period.
Yeah.
I need to be the hardest worker in the room, period. Not because it will make me worthless if I don't.
Yeah.
Nigga, you don't I don't want him or our other children growing up thinking they just deserve anything because of who they are, how they look, or what they could be capable of, but what they are capable of.
Yeah. And I agree. I think that the biggest thing that we're going to face when it comes to him, or one of the biggest things, because it could change with any of our kids that come, but I think right now something that's going to be concerning is just making sure the influence around him does not take away the lessons that we're hoping to instill in him. And we've talked about that a lot too. And on some days I'm like, oh no, like don't worry about that, because it's all about access. But it is unfortunate because we are in a state where people have influence and you don't even know they have influence, and it's unfortunate.
The people who have influence,
yeah, and it's
especially in the day of social
going.
media, you don't know who he'll be influenced by 10 years from now because of what he's watching.
Exactly, and that's gonna be right now. I say that's gonna be our biggest concern, because he is very strong-willed at 2. He's
very independent,
crazy kid, but I know that with a confident kid or a strong-willed kid, it still comes a time to mold them. And I think a lot of the times parents give up, or like, oh no, they got it, they're independent, they've been independent since birth, which might be true. However, you have to adjust, you have to differentiate. Whereas you may have planned to cater to a child that had low self-esteem, or trying to make sure that they had all the tools, you have to change it for now this kid that is so influential, not so influential, so independent, and so ready to take on the world. Like, okay, wait, let's halt our brakes. Let's make sure that we know what you're going to face. Yep. Help quiz them. I don't know. What do you do in this situation? Or what are you thinking about this? Or, ask them those questions that you think they're too young to take in, because they take in everything you're saying and your actions.
I also think we underestimate the amount of responsibility as parents that we should have because of our children's self-esteem. Mm-hmm. As far as I'm concerned, if he were to have self-esteem, I think it's our fault, because we should instill. I'm not somebody who has low self-esteem because of my abilities. Yeah. If I didn't have these abilities, I probably would. But I know, like, there are days I don't feel as confident as others. There's days where I'm like, I'm kind of going through a hard headspace right now. But I never, ever, ever feel less than, because I know that I'm capable, and I know that I am willing to become better if I'm not the best at everything that I do. Yeah. And I think that also I think that's the key to self-esteem personally. I feel like if people have low self-esteem, it's because lack of yearning or lack of understanding what they want to do. If they know what they want to do, lack of understanding of how to do it. If they know how to do it, lack of being good at it. And I think self-esteem, again, is something that you earn. I don't think we inherently have that.
And that's a good point. I think, to piggyback off of the parents being in control of that, I think it goes into my psychology class on the different types of parenting, and just understanding, like, when you have a kid that is constantly looking for reassurance and validation and all those things, there is a way to address it. Because on one side, yes, you want to make sure that you're providing that validation for your child, but also as a societal member, you want to also address that you don't need that validation. You don't need to seek a validation from somebody else. And it's a balance. You have to know, okay, how do I shut down this constant need for validation without taking away my child's need for me to make sure I see them? Yep. And I think that goes into the self-esteem. If you have a parent that is constantly beating you down, for example, my growing up I was always called conceited. I was a very confident kid. Like, you couldn't tell me I wasn't beautiful. You couldn't. But after so many years of being called conceited, and knowing that they meant it in a negative connotation, I start to feel insecure. Like, okay, well, let me stop calling myself pretty. Let me stop wanting to make sure my appearance was up to par. And here I am, a grown-ass woman. I still feel insecure. I feel like I have to belittle myself in order to make other people feel like I'm not arrogant. When in reality, being arrogant is being a dick. I'm not a dick, but I know that I am attractive. I know that I have pretty tendencies. Even saying that is hard to say, and it's literally giving an example. So that alone, I think, goes back to, it is our parents' responsibility. It is our parents' responsibility to make sure that we are constantly reinstilling the values that we want them to have, or the practices we want, without belittling them.
Yeah. I think it's funny, again, but back to us being two sides of the same coin. I was the opposite. I was very insecure coming up within middle school and high school, and I started learning more, like wrestling within sports. And for those who don't know, I'm a MMA fighter now, and I'm also a welder professionally. So within that, things I know that I'm very good at, I am much more confident. But I had to go through the stage of, I suck. I'm improving. I'm getting better. I am very good at this.
Yeah.
And for me, that's where my insecurity started to dwindle, is the more I learned. And I gained self-esteem by just becoming better. I think that kind of ties into us teaching him as a man. That's you need to learn better in order to become better. And when it comes to, personally, I am somebody who thinks it can be a little important to be arrogant in order to be good at something. Not arrogance in the sense of I'm better than you. But if somebody challenges me, it's okay. Like, okay, now I'm going to show you how good I am. You tried to tell me that you are better than me, or that I shouldn't think highly of myself. Now I'm going to give you a reason to think I really am arrogant.
Yeah.
I'm going to show you it, because for me, arrogance is thinking you're better than you actually are.
No, dick.
I might no. Let me explain. Cockiness is knowing your abilities and just flaunting it. I can be very flamboyant and peacocking. But I know that I'm good. I don't just think that I'm good. Arrogance is thinking you're good and not being good.
Right.
So a lot of times I think people see people who they think are arrogant but are really just cocky. And I think if you're good at something, you have a right to be cocky.
But I think, too, just to tie those two together, so for me, because I felt so insecure with my outer, my inner strengthened. Like, my business, my school, like, all those things I put a lot of effort into, because I'm like, okay, if I don't feel secure about my appearance, all I have is accomplishments. Yeah. That's all I got. And I'm just going to throw it at anyone and be like, well, no, I've done this, this, and this. And that was my value. So, like, in my other episodes, I've talked about becoming a mom and having to be at home and feeling like my value was completely gone because I'm no longer.
I think it'll be hard for me if we have a daughter, because I think everything you're saying that is inherent in women, I think, is something I want to teach him the opposite. I want him to really, well, just what he's, like, women are taught, if you don't look this, I think insecurity with women at least comes from what I was saying earlier, is they're taught that they have value in certain things. So if a little girl is told, oh, you're beautiful, but then God forbid she becomes less and less attractive the older she gets, that's where that insecurity derives from, because she's very...
No. Sorry, pause that.
Hear me out.
Okay, go ahead.
She very well could be losing something she thought was her only source of value. Meanwhile, in men, not saying, oh, you're ugly, but teach, like, your value doesn't come from how you look. Your value comes in what you will be able to do.
Yeah. And I guess, no, it makes sense. And I think what, at least from my experiences right now, because now I'm trying to make sure before I say this, but with my experiences, what I think was very conflicting is, growing up, I was always called pretty, right? Like, that was always my common compliment. However, when you start to express it, like we talked about, that pattern of people not wanting to hear it or not wanting to accept the fact that you're taking on that that mindset. I think the biggest thing that comes with women and little girls is a sense of jealousy. I think that for some people, like when you have a daughter, and follow me because it's going to be it's going to be a tangent. When you have a little girl, right, you're so excited. You hope that they're beautiful. You hope they look like you. You hope they have all these things and they embody it and they become this amazing person. Then you get it. And you're like, oh my gosh, you're amazing. You're amazing. You're so beautiful. You're so wonderful. You do all these things. But then they get to a point of age to where they can not only be what you instilled in them, but now they can transcend past anything you ever thought you would be. So now, instead of that little girl now being beautiful, being amazing, being all these things, now they're conceited. Now they're doing too much. Now they're not following your path. All these things start to come into play. And I think about what you just said as far as now they're losing that sense of value. I don't necessarily think it's because those traits are gone. I think it's because instead of it being a simple transition of life, like, oh, at some point they are going to fade. Looks fade. That is a common.
What's your mean?
It's common
Conception.
Thank you.
Common misconception.
Yes. Okay. Yes. It's going to fade. However, I feel like women, I think more so women of color, have a hard time teaching the phases of beauty of value because it's always reactive. It's always, okay, well, I'm starting to feel some things about myself, so let me go ahead and dim this person and project. Yes, and project it because I'm incapable of articulating what I'm actually experiencing or dealing with it within myself, because that has nothing to do with that little baby. Or to even flip it with people around you, why is it that we allow others to dim our light? Like, that was something that I've always been taught by outsiders. I was never taught this by people in my circle. Always by outsiders. Stop letting people dim your light. Stop people letting dim your light. And it's so difficult when you've already taken in people that you thought were supposed to teach you otherwise, and change it. We went on a really long tangent there. But long story short, I think it's very interesting when it comes down to that concept, because we think that we're supposed to be something. We try to figure out how we're going to do it. And at the end of it, not only are you trying to get back to what you want it to be, you're dealing with the trauma of people that couldn't just deal with it on their own. Like, why is it? It's a cycle of trauma. And it's so unfortunate. This has nothing to do with the topic. But
I think it does.
Like a self-love?
No, I think it's to what you're saying. We as parents need to, not necessarily the race aspect, but the parent aspect. Mm-hmm. We can allow ourselves to project our own trauma, our own experiences of what our parents were lacking onto our kids. We have to be better. We have to, again, not to beat a dead horse, but something I want to teach him and our other three boys.
Our little girl.
That I will not demand or love them any less
if they don't have the skill or the
if they
beauty.
don't have the skill or are not the hardest workers in the room. Yeah. But I want to teach them to want that. Yeah. I want to teach them that you might not be the best, but you can always be better. You can always improve. You can always learn something new. This wide, vast world always has something to offer you, and never take that for granted. Again, not that I love you any less if you are not the best or if you don't do this perfectly, but you should want that for yourself. And don't think yourself any less than if you don't, but just know, okay, I'll try again tomorrow. Yeah. I'll be better tomorrow than I was today. It's a process that I think never ends. Especially, can't speak from a woman's point of view, but I know as a man, I think more men are on the same train, because men, I'm not saying women don't, but just from my perspective, men know, whether you're white, black, Hispanic, Asian, whatever, all men experience the world the exact same. Mm-hmm. If not the exact same, damn near the exact same. Mm-hmm. And we all go through the same struggles of our manhood being questioned, or needing to be better at something, or feeling less than because we're not the best at something, or needing to be the head of a household and not necessarily knowing how to navigate that. Mm-hmm. And I think being the head of a household, being the I hate using this term, but the alpha male of a household, you have to know when to let the people underneath you, not that they're less than you, but underneath you because you're leading them, fall, help them back up, and also trial and error on their own. And know that when you, even as a leader, is something that never stops, need to get better at that, need to fix aspects within your leadership.
Yeah. What he said.
Is there any other topics?
Did
we get all of them?
I think we did, but final thoughts. Okay, so with this being the episode for love, what do you think you envision his love legacy looking like? Like, what do you hope to make sure he got from our marriage as he starts to pursue?
This is there was no quit, and that we never disrespected each other in front of him. I think is an important part, because we're always gonna go through things as married people. So I think to teach him that there is a perfect method is not something that he should be taught, because it's wildly unrealistic, and that in itself can create trauma, and because he'll be searching that forever.
Molly.
Yeah, insecure. So I think it's important to teach him and the 3 boys that
He has something to say.
never search for a perfect relationship,
Mhm.
but you can create perfection within your own relationship. It's something that has to be
Your
earned.
perfection.
Yeah. Your
And on
perfection.
that note, we're
Please
going to
don't.
close the episode. So that was definitely the best. We're probably going to pick it up with our parenting segment in April that he doesn't know about yet. But we're going to do a parenting episode, and that'll be more in depth. Just everything, the ups and downs. We'll definitely dive into it more. But this was our Black is Love episode with the interracial with the interracial kings.
My hairline is crooked.
Bubba. Anyway, bye guys. See?